So we are going to start with the idea of one-point linear perspective at its most basic form. To start with, we are going to use a large piece of paper, and there is actually a reason that we're using a paper that's so big. It's so that we can get a rectangle within that overall size, so that way we can have some room to work around with our rulers or with a straight edge. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm measuring off a distance to get a rectangle within my paper, and that measurement is 11 by 16. Make sure you have done the same thing, that you have an 11 by 16 rectangle within your big paper, and we're going to about the middle, maybe just a little bit below the middle of that paper, and you're going to be doing a horizon line. The horizon line, as you learned from the warm-up, is a horizontal line where technically the earth and the sky meet, or it's also known as eye level. I would go ahead and label it. So I would write that word out, or those two words out, horizon line, just so that you know and are familiarized with that term. I'm doing this with vine charcoal, but you don't have to. You can do it with a regular graphite pencil. That works equally well. I'm using vine charcoal so that it shows up on the camera. If I just stick to a regular pencil, it won't show. But there are some advantages to using vine charcoal. You could use a vine charcoal twig if you want. Not sure if there's enough for every student, but there is some. And now I'm putting in a vanishing point kind of on the middle of that horizon line and definitely on the horizon line. So that dot sits exactly on the horizon line itself. So it's like a little period there. And you want to label that too. A vanishing point is a point at which all things seemingly vanish. So they get so small that you can no longer see them. When we're doing this type of linear perspective work, I really like to use this type of tool. It's actually a drafting tool. It's a triangle shape, and it's clear. Some of them will have measurements on them, but the ones that I have in the classroom don't have any measurements, which means you'll need to kind of eyeball it if you're trying to make a perfect square. To start with, we're going to begin by putting a 2 by 2 inch square in the upper left-hand corner. And then we are going to be connecting the corners of that square to the vanishing point. Now, we're not going to imagine this square as transparent, so that means that only a few corners will connect to that point. I've zoomed in so you can see this a little bit better. So you're going to go from each corner, although in this case it's only going to be 3, and they're the 3 that are closest to the vanishing point, and you take your pencil and you lightly connect up to the vanishing point. So that's really the key. All lines need to lead back to the vanishing point, at least the sides that angle off into the distance. Make sure to go lightly. I know I've said this before, but you're going to have to erase some of these lines, so it's in your best interest to go as light as possible on these. It's always easier to darken a line than it is to lighten a line up, because now we're going to have to close off the sides, right? Because that cube is going back indefinitely into that vanishing point, and now we just need to close off the sides. This part can be a little bit tricky. So really, there are 2 sides here that are angling back to the vanishing point. There's the side that I'm at right now. You have to understand the rule of parallel lines to get this right. So on that first side, it's a vertical line, so I needed to transfer that line, which is also a vertical, to close off the form. Now the bottom side is a horizontal line, so I'm going to have to line it up with the corners so that they are aligned up, and put that horizontal line on the bottom. You want to just keep in mind parallel angles here, parallel lines, and then there are still kind of these 3 lines that are strings attached that are going off into the distance towards that vanishing point. You no longer need those lines, so you can go ahead and erase those out so that now you have a floating cube. Because one of my goals with you is that you learn how to create form, we're going to go ahead and shade these in. Now there is a rule I've talked about before, and it has to do with a cube in particular, but whenever you do a box or a cube, you have to have a side that is light, a side that is medium, and a side that is dark. And I'm talking in terms of value and shading. So we're going to do that here. You're going to envision a light source, because you have to understand where the light's coming from in order to have the light pattern correct. But we're going to have a light side, a medium side, and a dark side. And we're going to try and continue to be faithful to that light pattern as you work on your other forms, because we're not just doing one block. So the underside is the medium, the side to the right is the dark side, and the front side is the lightest. So I'm not going to give any value to the front. So technically I'm just asking you to shade in two sides, a medium side and a dark side. Okay, so now that you're done with your first block, we're going to move on to our second. We're going to be doing 8 of these in total. I know, it's a lot, but you can do it. And we are going back to drawing basics, but that doesn't mean we're not going back to painting, because we will. We'll be painting, hopefully, next week, provided you have your image. Otherwise, we'll continue to do linear perspective. So this cube I'm making, it's not really a square this time, it's more of a rectangle. You can't see the top of it, it's going off the paper. So just the way this one is positioned, and because we're not envisioning these as see-through, transparent, we're just going to only connect 2 corners to that vanishing point. So in some ways it's going to be easier. And it's the 2 corners that are closest to that vanishing point that you're connecting. So it's those 2 corners. And you're going to slowly and lightly draw a line connecting them all the way to that vanishing point. So it should look like a triangle, like that. And then we're going to need to close off that shape so it's not going back indefinitely. We're going to crop that off. And again, parallel lines. That line is a horizontal line there. And again, going lightly with your pencil mark or with your fine charcoal. And then you can see I'm just wiping it out, the fine charcoal, with a tissue or a paper towel, and then just erasing it a little bit. And then same deal, you want to make sure that you have a side that is in shadow and a side that is in light. We're only seeing 2 sides of this form, so it only needs to have one side in shadow, one side in light. Okay, so moving on to box number 3. We're going to go to the upper right-hand corner this time. And again, your boxes should always be 1.5 inches or larger. They shouldn't be smaller than that. So we're first starting off with a basic rectangular or square shape. This one's more of a rectangle. And again, you're going to go from corner to corner, connecting to the vanishing point. So you guys should start to see a pattern. If I were doing this with pencil, I would pivot my pencil point on that vanishing point, because it's easy to have that ruler kind of slide off out of position. There's also kind of a technique to holding a ruler when you're doing this. You kind of make an L shape with your hand so your ruler doesn't slip. And just make sure your hand is steady when you're holding that triangular device, that drafting tool. Make sure that when you're closing off the form that you use that rule of parallel lines. So if it's a horizontal line you see on that side, it needs to be closed off with a horizontal line. Same idea when you go to shade, that you want to have a medium side. In this case, it should be the underside of the box, and then a dark side and a light side. The top side or the front should always be the light side in this situation, in this lighting scenario. So I'm teaching you this not just to torture you. There is a purpose to it. This is something I use all the time because I do a lot of architectural work. So that means I'm drawing buildings or interiors. Interior meaning like the inside of like a house, for example. And you have to have an understanding of perspective to do that. Perspective, 1-point perspective like we're doing, is difficult for some people to get at first, but that's okay. It was hard for me to do too. So you can see here on the screen, I'm putting in another box, only this time I'm going right on top of the horizon line, you can do that as well. And you can see I'm not even measuring these. So these squares that you're starting off with, or rectangles, they don't necessarily have to be 100% perfect. As long as they correctly connect up to the vanishing point, we're all good. This one I decided to make a little bit more complicated. I'm going to zoom in. I made an X, so I've just connected one diagonal corner to the other to make like an X pattern, like in back of an envelope. And then from that middle of the X, I'm going to draw a line straight up. It's a vertical line. That's so that I can create a perfect triangle on top. So this would, in essence, it's the basics of doing a house that's in 1-point perspective. I'm going to make the roof, which is a triangle shape. So I went to that middle vertical axis and I put a little dot there. That's where my roof line connects up to get that triangle. And I can show you how to do that if it's confusing. And then you connect up all sides to the vanishing point. Now I have my triangle go a little beyond the square. That was on purpose because most houses, their roofs do extend beyond the house. So there are 3 lines really that connect up. You can also go back later and erase out the horizon line where it crosses through your object. So that's a parallel side there, but the roof parallel side is a different angle because all the ones we've done previously are either horizontal or vertical in with the angle of the line. This one is not. It's a diagonal line for that roof. Now you can go in and erase those lines that you no longer need. Some of the lines you do need, like you need the edge of the roof, but you don't need that X anymore. So that's the thing about 1-point perspective. Sometimes there is extra lines left over that you have to be prepared to erase out. You no longer need them. And we're still going to apply the shading to this as well. Remember the light pattern, so it's going to be super dark on the side I'm working on right now. And then I'm going to go for a medium value for the roof. And the front can be plain blank white. Now we're going to go below the horizon line and start doing some shapes below, but those are shapes we are going to convert into forms. It's really important to me that you understand that we start off with a shape which is flat and we turn it into something that is 3-dimensional. For those who want a challenge, you can make this look like a box that has a side open, so we're actually looking into a box. So for that, you'd have to connect all 4 corners to the vanishing point, similar in the way that you would do it if it were a transparent cube. So you're going to connect corner to corner. I'm going to start this box just the same way we started the very first box, connecting all 3 corners and then making sure to make it a form that is not going back indefinitely by getting in the parallel lines. Now we have a basic cube, but we're going to go to the inside and we're going to connect up that inside corner to the vanishing point. You don't actually have to draw it all the way through the box. I'm just going to stop my line at the top part of the box since I know I'm not going to need that. And then you're going to have to do the parallel line thing because the line on the bottom is a horizontal line and the line on the top is a vertical line. You want to kind of make sure it lines up with that top corner there. So I'm starting off by making the box kind of transparent, but I'm going to make sure that it doesn't look transparent at the end by erasing the lines I don't need anymore. So I'm erasing those lines I no longer need, and then I can go in and shade. So that's what it looks like. I want to make sure that the interior of the box is nice and dark, but you just need to make sure that each side of the box has a little bit different value. You don't want to have 2 values that are the same inside of that box.